All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today we are doing a special episode. This isn't actually an episode of Piecing It Together at all. This is an episode of my other podcast, Bird Road, which hopefully you are subscribed to. But if you are not and you haven't heard this already, a couple weeks ago, we took a look at the documentary Boys State from A24 and Apple TV. And it is a fantastic documentary, a great film, and something we took a full episode to talk about. And we had a great guest on, Elijah Manley, who actually participated in Boys State a few years back. So it was some really great insight into the program. And, we got a few puzzle pieces in at the end of the conversation as well. So we tied it all back to the whole piecing it together thing. So for those of you who haven't heard it over on Bird Road, now you're going to get to hear it here on Piecing It Together. So, as always, I want to remind you, before we get into that, make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is you listen to podcasts. And you can, of course, subscribe to Bird Road while you're at it. And follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. And join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we talk about all the movies we talk about on the show. And other than that, I think it's time to get into this conversation about Boys State.
Q.
And I'm Jewish Dave.
And this is Bird Road.
This is Bird Road.
So Dave, we're doing a little film analysis today, a little film review. We're going to dive into a compelling new documentary. Maybe it's a little terrifying. I know it can seem like the Zoomers are a little terrifying sometimes. But before we jump into it, first things first, I want to introduce our guest. We're going to do a little intro to the movie and we're going to talk about it before we jump into our conversation. But I want you all to welcome our returning champion, our two-time guest, fresh off of his electrifying run to the Florida State House District 94 primary. It's Elijah Manley. Elijah, welcome back to Bird Road.
Thank you for having me on again.
So before we get to our little review, I want to drop a little plug in here to let everyone know Elijah unfortunately did not win his campaign, which he ran on a shoestring budget, got everything he could out of it against a really strong incumbent. He went up against an opponent with like all the institutional support in the world, all the corporate backing in the world, outraised him by a factor of about 8. And it's not easy to be an upstart, progressive, a leftist in this state or in this country. It's not easy to swear off corporate cash. And Elijah left it all out on the court. He finished in what's called campaign debt, which is a thing. It's not that weird of a thing. It's pretty common. Kamala Harris's campaign finished in campaign debt. A lot of other campaigns, the high-profile campaigns that you know about, finished in campaign debt. Nowhere near as little as what Elijah finished in. So help him out. Head over to Act Blue. We're going to have a link in the show note description. You can also check out ElijahManley.com. Go over there, contribute, help close the gap so that Elijah can run for something else as soon as possible because we need him. We need him in office. We need people like him in office. So on to the show, Dave. What were you doing between 11th and 12th grade? I want you to transport yourself back to the Poconos back in the late 90s.
Sure, yeah. My life and my interests and my areas of expertise included things like video games and sneaking French fries into movie theaters and generally a lot of like Wu-Tang and stuff like that. Like that's where my interests lied at that time.
Okay, that's pretty normal, I think. I mean, I was more like, trying to hook up with girls and just, playing sports and trying to enjoy myself. But there was this whole crowd that was already at that age very plugged in and very aware, not just of their surroundings like you and I probably weren't, but more like aware socially and aware politically and ready to sort of get started on their career. And for those people, there's a program that's part of this sort of like invisible infrastructure in our country. And it's called Boys State. There is a girls' state too, but for the purposes of this episode, we're talking about Boys State, which is a summer leadership and citizenship program for high school juniors heading into 12th grade. And it focuses on the mechanics of American government and politics. It's sort of inherently militaristic because it's run by the American Legion, but it doesn't solely focus on that. The gaze is sort of inherently pro-U.S. It's kind of pro-empire. In most conservative states, it takes on this sort of pro-conservative sheen, and it's an explicitly political event. So that part of it is supercharged, especially these days. So that is the program Boys State, this sort of invisible piece of infrastructure that a lot of us, people like you and I, when we were dumbass 17-year-olds, never interacted with, probably didn't even really know about.
Sure.
Dave, tell us about Boys State, the documentary that we're talking about today.
So this documentary just came out on Apple TV, and it's also distributed by A24. It was picked up, I believe, a record sum, if not a record, a very high amount for a documentary at Sundance earlier this year after winning the Documentary Grand Jury Prize. It's directed by Jesse Moss and Amanda McBain, who previously made the highly acclaimed 2014 documentary, The Overnighters, and just kind of captures this phenomenon known as Boys State in a way. We'll get into it more in the conversation, but A24 is known for their horror movies, and this movie is absolutely chilling.
Yeah, so a quick note, the subject matter of the movie is from 2018, so all these kids are adults now, so I think it's okay for us to kind of bust their balls a little bit and make fun of them a little. But we brought in our own Zoomer to be able to do that, our own Gen Z guy, and I think he's going to be able to help us out a little. Some folks that have attended Boys State. In the movie, they mentioned Bill Clinton, Cory Booker, Dick Cheney, Rush Limbaugh. How about this, Dave? Tim Cook, Michael Jordan, Bon Jovi, Garth Brooks, Neil Armstrong, and Harry Reid from our old neck of the woods.
You left out the best one. Roger Ebert.
Roger Ebert? I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
So this wasn't an accident that we picked Elijah to join us. I was looking for guests for this show, Elijah, and I came up on an old Insta post of yours because I was randomly Googling around like, who do I know who might have been a part of this? And for some of you that might not know, not only was Elijah a selection for Boys State 2016 delegation, but along with being a statesman, he was actually Speaker of the House pro tempore. So, Elijah, tell us about your experience at Boys State. I assume you went up to Tallahassee. What was it like?
It was a really fun experience. I remember when I first walked into the American Legion post. I was in JROTC at the time. I was in my Navy JROTC at Fort Lauderdale High School. And I remember one of my friends talking about it. And I'm like, what is this mess? So I remember going to the American Legion, and there were some guys in some uniforms, and they were just staring me down. And I'm like, oh, Lord, it's another ROTC program or something. But they didn't really ask any. They asked a few questions about patriotism, all of that, about, our character. They wanted to know a lot about us as individuals. And I got selected. And I was sent to Tallahassee, and, our post, they wanted me to run for governor of Boys State. They wanted a governor from Broward at Boys State. So it was a really fun experience to get there and have hundreds of young people who were from different places across the state with different political beliefs, different backgrounds, different family backgrounds, different interests. It was a really fun experience. So I think it kind of was the catalyst of me running for office in a way too.
That's cool that it was like sort of a little bit of a part of your origin story. I didn't know that you were part of ROTC.
Yeah.
It's a really common thing. Dave, did you guys have big ROTC in Pennsylvania or no?
Not really, I don't think.
Yeah, and see, I went to high school in North Carolina, and it was big there. It wasn't so big in. I went to middle school and elementary school in New York, and what we had was Civil Air Patrol, which I'm sure we had ROTC too. But it's funny because there's sort of these. They're like quasi-militaristic organizations, and I don't know how fully formed your politics were back then. I mean, did you feel weird at all? Did you have to like modulate your language, or were you very forthcoming about your political beliefs back then, or like how did you handle that during the whole vetting process when they were deciding on you?
For the American Legion, or for
yeah, like when you went in front of the American Legion to apply for Boys State.
I don't really remember them delving too deep into my political beliefs. I remember them wanting to know more about my character, if I was in trouble before with law enforcement, if I had anything they needed to know about. And they just really wanted to know the character of the individuals, as well as, really how patriotic we were to the country. And maybe not, just the country itself, but to our own community. So it was a plus to have done things in your own community. It was a plus to have been able to work in your own community and do things that all added to the application as well.
So I don't know if you had a chance to see it, because I feel like, did I tip you off to this movie, or were you kind of aware of this movie already before?
I saw ads about it, but I think you kind of got me to really watch it, and I didn't know one of my friends, Steven Garza, was actually in it until, you know.
And we're gonna get into Steven.
it was interesting.
we're gonna talk a lot about Steven Garza. I say that to bring up the concept of the or to invoke the idea of the social media response, Dave, that came out around this, because in this modern age, people see behind the scenes at a place like this, and they see that it's like a little scary and a little bit like, or not scary is not the right word, a little like aggressive and macho and misogynistic, and that was a lot of the wording and a lot of the reception that it got on social media. And I feel like that comes from people who didn't, I don't know, grow up in participating in like all boys stuff. All I saw was really just dumbass teenage boys being dumbass teenage boys. I'm wondering how did you feel, or how did you receive that when you were doing your tour? And like, were you kind of looking around like, oh, these guys are all dumbasses? Or were you like, hey, I'm a teenager too, I'm a dumbass too, and just kind of having fun with it? Like, what was that experience like?
I guess when I already went, I was kind of already political. You know, when we first got on the bus, you know, everyone was like, are you running for governor? Are you running for governor of Boise State already? I was already kind of involved a little bit here locally. So, you know, I already had the name a little bit. I just saw teenagers. It was the same as in high school, you know, people, you know, who just wanted to go because they wanted to get away from home during the summer. People who wanted to go because, you know, they didn't have anything else to do. And then there were people who were really into politics, like who really actually wanted to become the actual governor in like 15, 20 years. People who were really
you saw some people like that. Did you recognize the archetypes of the people in the movie from people that you actually met in real life? Like the go-getter and the guy who's just there because he's the popular guy and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, there were people who were just, you know, they were popular. They're going to go to UF or something. And then there were people who, you know, they really thought, you know, they're going to be governor in the future. They had the really ambitious people who just, you know, the moment they stepped off the bus, they were, you know, everybody had they had a little clique of 100 people with them. So, right. It was great to navigate. I did, you know, it was just like anything you'd see anywhere. It's like put a bunch of boys to sleep over in a house. It'll be the same thing. Except, you know, we were in the state capitol.
Dave, how did you sort of come to how did you process the social media reaction to this? And I know you weren't a sports guy growing up, and that's like a big difference between me and you, is that I, you know, went to, you know, football camp and basketball camp, and I played football and basketball and did a lot of all guys stuff in that era of high school, and you didn't so much. So, I mean, like, how did you process and see the kids acting like kids? Did you think like, oh my God, I'm weeping for the future? Or is this just like, well, yeah, I knew that people, kids, especially at that age, are like that?
I certainly grew up around my fair share of grossness, you know, as far as guys are concerned. And so I certainly knew that that's the way that things are. I think that what you're seeing, though, kind of flies in the face of what we're being kind of told that people are evolving from, to something that's a little bit maybe, a little bit classier, a little bit not so aggressive, you know, in what we're supposed to be getting to. And so then you see all of these 1,000 teenagers just going crazy and everything, and Lord of the Flies style, you know, and you're like, geez, wow, this is what teenagers still are like, I guess. And it really is still this crazy.
So I have a few clips that I want to play during the course of this. And the first one is, to your point, Dave, I'm going to play a clip of a guy who was not a main character, and we actually only saw him for a minute. He was running for governor of the Federalist Party. His name was Wyatt Schaefer, and we know that because he yells his name, Wyatt Schaefer. And I want to get your reaction, Elijah, to like, I'm trying to picture a situation where younger, 17-year-old Elijah Manley was in a room doing politics with people like this, and it's a pretty conservative, regressive kid, shockingly at this young age. But this is Wyatt Schaefer.
I'm going to use this devotion to see change for this year's nationalists and to pressure the Federalists into a state of absolute submission. Yeah! Yes! Do you want a chairman who will act for each and every one of your personal desires, then vote for Wyatt Schaefer. Do you want a chairman for the people? Yes! Then vote for Wyatt Schaefer! Yes! Yes!
So was there a lot of that energy at your time when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really familiar. I mean, we had guys like that, and we were really rah-rah type of people who tried to rile up the place. And it was very conservative. I mean, I saw with the Texas boys statement in Florida, it was really conservative. It was all about abortion and guns again. I don't know how the hell I got elected through all of that, but I did. I lost the governorship, though. I ran for governor, but I lost him in the Federalist primary. I was a Federalist. Lost in the primary there because I kind of I tried to adapt to it was really white and really conservative and guns and all that stuff. So I tried to play the Trump card a little bit, bully my way through, but it didn't work in the Federalist Party. It would have worked in the Nationalists, though, but it didn't work in the Federalist Party, so I lost. But I ended up becoming the Speaker Pro Tem, which is like the most powerful legislative position. So I ended up doing that, and I don't know how I did it, but you did have a lot of people, who were really rah-rah and petty, and it was interesting.
But that's funny because one of the things that I noticed, and I went into this documentary without a lot of expectations. I assumed that these would be young kids that make lots of mistakes and are taken by people like Wyatt that we just heard, I mean, shit, this country was taken in by somebody like that 4 years ago. And the whole country voted half the country voted for somebody like that. But surprisingly, as we get into some of the people that ended up doing really well in this documentary, people who have surprisingly really good politics. It seemed like the kids would get hyped up and laugh and clap for people like Wyatt. And I don't mean to pick on Wyatt, but he was the craziest one that we saw in the documentary. It seemed like they would really kind of get amped up by him, but those kind of people didn't really do well. It seemed like, and I want to actually throw this over to you, Dave. Like, were you surprised by that? Because we talked last week on the show when we were talking with James, our last guest. I hadn't seen this documentary yet, but you were saying like, oh, I'm a little worried because like you watch this and you're scared that these kids are going to be making the same mistakes that we made. But it seems like in a lot of cases, when you thought that they would get swept up by people who were more explosive or bombastic, they end up making the right choice. So like, were you surprised on like a second rewatch of that, Dave? Or like, I don't know, what did you think?
I mean, I guess it's kind of almost like a silver lining kind of mentality, like where hopefully there is some positive outlook in this. And certainly I don't think it's meant to frame everything as doom and gloom as maybe I'm taking away from it. Maybe that's just in my nature.
Yeah, that is you. You're like Eeyore. You're like ready to. Look, I want to jump into some of these people. They focused the documentary on 4 specific characters, 4 people, 4 subjects, and the first one is somebody that Elijah actually, to my surprise, he told me that he knows and that he's friends with. It's Steven Garza. I'm going to play a little introduction of Steven that I found to be, worthy.
Good morning. Good. Excited.
Good.
I'm Steven Garza.
Did your parents come with you?
Huh?
Did your parents come with you?
Oh, no, they're not. No, they have work.
Yeah, and I picked that clip because of all the people that we meet during the show and we see the inside of a lot of the people's houses. Steven is clearly the one who most identifiably comes from a working class background, and like his parents had to work that day. They couldn't just bring him to this event. And those of us who come from like those kind of backgrounds, we recognize that and we see that. I think we have a lot of really positive things to say about Steven, but Elijah, I'd love to hear what you have to say about him.
I think he's really bright. I knew him for about almost 4 years now, actually. I remember when he was...
How did you guys meet?
I think it was over social media. He was really big into like Bernie 2016 stuff. And I remember when I first went to Boise State, he was really, interested in that stuff, in politics. And he was a really big Bernie person in 2016. So that's how we met, and we kind of just stay connected through social media, stay following each other. So I think he really does have a big passion for politics. That's good. I can see some really bright things in his future too.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things that I noticed about Steven, who kind of ends up being the star of this movie a little bit, is, I don't know, Dave, tell me if you noticed this or not. at the beginning of the movie, he's very gregarious, very friendly. He's trying to meet people. He doesn't really know anybody there. And Elijah, I wonder if this like mirrored your experience a little bit too. He was a little bit of an odd peg in his surroundings at this very conservative place. And they make a point of showing you him at the beginning of the week sort of walking alone to a lot of places. And he's by himself and he's talking to the camera and, giving his interview, his testimonial. About like a quarter of the way through the movie, he's got 2 or 3 people around him that end up being like sort of his close, helpful confidants in his campaign to become the nationalist gubernatorial candidate. Like halfway through the movie, he's got like a crowd of like 10 or 12 people. And then by the end of the movie, he's got like 50 people, 60 people behind him. And I thought that was fascinating. And if you just listen to him talk in this doc, you'll hear how talented he is. And I think that he also has sort of like that, I don't know what it is, but that like magnetism that helps people, inspire leadership. I mean, did you catch that, Dave?
Yeah, I think that actually speaks a lot to the talent of these filmmakers, because from what I understand, they decided on who they were going to follow ahead of time, and the fact that they found him and decided this is the guy to follow, is really interesting. As far as like, wow, like what did they see exactly going into it? They must have seen some kind of spark in him that he would be able to attract, a base of followers like that.
Elijah, how'd you think he like came off? I mean, generally in the movie.
I think I can hear my niece deciding what she thinks.
That's okay. Little nieces are welcome on Bird Road all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that too at the day. I saw how they kind of focused on a specific person, and I think that was smart. Maybe the boys didn't know. Like at the beginning, they probably thought somebody was just just recording their interactions, which was kind of the case at Florida Boys State too. But I think the filmmakers were really smart to focus on just to find the talent, to find like that riff as well, to focus on the people who have that talent and focus on people who are going to, be the roaring people who are going to scream and like try to excite people. So they kind of figured out who those personalities were ahead of time. And that was really good. And you find that stuff out on the bus, when everyone gets on that bus and so take that 8-hour drive, you really start to see who's the troublemakers, I'll call them.
Making my point again that Miami should be the capital of Florida. It's ridiculous that Tallahassee is the capital of Florida. Like
some people say Orlando, but
okay, Orlando, even Orlando, fine. Like I'll even take that. But
I'll go
yeah. One thing that I was thinking of you when I saw this, and I rewatched it, and I was trying to think of somebody like you up there in Tallahassee, Steven in this case in Austin, trying to modulate your language a little bit. Like I noticed that he used in his really rousing introductory speech, he used some language that you usually associate, maybe it shouldn't be this way, but you usually associate this kind of language with more like conservative orators. And he used words like patriot and loving America and bootstrapping. And when he talked about how his campaign wouldn't support secession because of his respect for the American Legion troops and things like that. That's not a thing that you hear that often from progressives. That's not really a line that you hear. Maybe it should be. I don't know. What did you think of that? And in your experience when you were getting up there and talking to people, did you find yourself sort of trying to hit the right tone and use language that you don't always maybe use naturally in your normal, political life?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to be authentic in a way for the most part too. It was difficult because, most of the boys a lot of them were from Northern Florida too, and they were really conservative and, they were really Trump. This was around the time when Trump was running. This was right before the 2016 election. So everyone there were, a lot of them were really Trumpy. So I had my clique when I first came in, and then we easily had to separate because we got there. We went to different places. It was separated from, the people you were on the bus with, you probably haven't seen again until the end. So I kind of had, I was put in places with people who were from different places who thought socialism was the devil, all of this good stuff. And I found myself having to kind of, I don't want to say I didn't change any views or anything, but just kind of be more, open and listening to what other people were, what the other boys were saying. And when I was running for governor, I learned this the hard way. I think you bring back up something you said earlier. where, they might be joking and playing around a lot, but a lot of them were more serious than we thought. It's just that was the behavior. But when it came time to vote, they didn't really want that, Trumpy kind of feel. It was,
they were looking for real leaders. They were looking for somebody who would really fill the role. Yeah.
Yeah. So I messed up on that. But I did kind of have to, be a little bit more careful what I was saying. And I wasn't a really big gun person at the time, like gun control person. So my big thing, which attracted a lot of them to me, was, I don't want to say opposition to gun control, but more or less, really supportive of the Second Amendment. So, my views on abortion, and I was not willing to change that at all. But when I talked about, Second Amendment right to bear arms, and, oh, look, a black guy who's lefty talking about the Second Amendment. So it was.
Dave, you and I were surprised because we were sort of chatting. I was chatting with you on Messenger while I was watching this movie. We were surprised that for 17-year-old kids, abortion is an issue that and I know it's Texas.
Sure.
And if you go to Michigan, or if you went to, I don't know, New York, or if you went to Oregon or something like that, maybe it's not the thing that's up on everybody's platform. But you and I were talking about how surprised we were, right, that abortion was something that these 17-year-old kids were talking about.
I'd say like 80% of all the issues are abortion and gun control, and like that takes up all the air.
It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. I thought that they'd be talking about other stuff. Like, I mean, I didn't hear them mention climate change one time, but again, I guess that's. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be way more affected. By, I mean, was that an issue that you guys addressed at all during your time in 2016, or no?
I certainly addressed it, myself and a few other people, but those bills always died. Like every single one of those bills, they were the first on the chopping block.
Just like real life, you mean? Just like actual Congress.
I was Speaker pro temp, so even like the Speaker of the House was just a figurehead role, who was just banging the gavel. But the pro temp controlled the calendar and decided which bills were hers. So I was really powerful, and I got to kill a lot of bills. But it was still a really conservative faction like the House who just kind of tried to do a coup against me. So I kind of identify with the young man in the video who they were trying to impeach. They tried to impeach.
They tried to impeach you? Oh, okay. All right. See, we're going to get to young Obama in a second because he's from Chicago. He's got a lot of similar Obama energy, although I think he's probably going to end up being more like on the advisory side, if I had to guess, and predict this kid's political future. But before we get to him, I want to talk about my favorite character in the movie, and not the best character at all, because I think one day I'm probably going to be casting my vote for Stephen Garza for president, and right after Elijah Manley finishes his term. But Robert McDougal. Okay, Robert McDougal was a nationalist, second place group. Dave, you knew I would love this guy. Knew I would love. I see myself in high school in this guy. If somebody told me, 17-year-old me, we're going to drop you in a political theater of some kind for a week, I would be completely clueless like this guy was, and I would just be waffling back and forth and wondering who is going to do a push-up contest with me. That's all I would care about at age 17. So Robert McDougal was the Nationalists' second-place gubernatorial candidate, maybe the most complex character in this movie. He's kind of a handsome, cavalier goofball from Austin, clearly comes from wealth. Said that he had already settled on going to West Point, like when he was a young kid, and I think that he's harmless in a way because I don't see him as being a person who's actually going to end up being in politics. Like, this is the kind of guy who's going to end up as like a vice president at like a textiles company, or he's going to like own a Ford dealership or something. He's not going to be, I don't think, a politician. I want to play just our little introduction to Robert really quick.
All my friends are wondering now, where do I want to go to college? What do I want to do? And I guess I've always had the luxury of knowing I'm only applying to West Point. I'm only applying one place.
People say these things like, so polarized now, but you look back, we were just as polarized in the 1800s. Then again, back then they were debating slavery, then there was the Civil War. So I feel like it is at least somewhat of a problem.
This guy's just generally clueless, and I love him for it. He ends up losing, of course, to Stephen Garza. I don't know. There's just something magnetic about this guy, even though his politics are terrible. Later on, we find out that he's actually more of a progressive and more of a liberal than he's saying he is. He says that he actually is, pro-choice, and he has all these, but he just chooses. We were talking a second ago about how, like, okay, well, I want to like try to appeal to people, but I don't want to just outwardly lie about who I am. But Elijah, in this case, this is somebody who chose that path, who was just like, no, I'm just gonna lie and make things up. Did you like meet a lot of people? Was there a lot of that going on, I guess?
Yeah, well, there was quite a bit of it, actually. I mean, I lost to someone in the primary who was kind of like that. Well, actually, no. I think on the other side, there was somebody who was like that, and they almost had their nomination. But I was running for speaker against a few of them, and I don't know how I made it through, but this person would just, make up things and talk about things I know they didn't believe, because, we were, there were a couple of dorms down from me. So we were on the same floor, we spoke and everything. And, it was just really not like conservative at all. They were just really clueless about politics. And if they take a guess where they were on the political, landscape, I would say they would probably be left of center, but they were the most conservative person there. They were making up things going. They knew how to pander, and I'm like, that person has a real bright future in politics. But there were a lot of honest people too, people who really, they might have been conservative, but they were kind of honest. I'll listen. I'll try to, make friends and see what you guys think about things. And then there were people who were really unabashedly like pro-Trump and really pro-gun and didn't care what anyone thought, and like, they got their way in a lot of ways too.
It's funny, this mishmash, Dave. I want to know what you thought of Robert, because I could tell that, I know that you must have known that was a guy that I was going to like.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Like, what did you think of Robert?
I think he was like a pisser,
He was a complete pisser. Yeah, he was a total pisser. He was like, at one point, I got another clip of him like challenging random people that he's trying to get their signatures for their votes to push-ups.
I have key points. I feel like trying to find a middle ground is gonna leave nobody happy. You're gonna be the guy who's standing there while one person raises their hand for you. Push-ups, come on, push-ups. Let's go. Push-ups, come on, anybody, push-ups.
If you want to do
Push-ups right now?
It kind of sounds like Bill Clinton a little bit.
He's got a lot of Clinton. He's got a lot of W energy too. I think. I feel like he's got a lot of Bush energy. Definitely comes from a family like that. He's you can tell when they give us a glimpse inside his home, he's pretty well off, and that plays, I'm sure, a lot into his. What I was going to say is, like, the thing that's interesting to me about Robert and people like him is sort of how loosely, like, it shows like how your politics when you're a kid, for the most part, unless you're somebody like Elijah. Like, for the most part, it's really just this mishmash of things that your parents have told you that you agree with, things that your parents told you that you don't agree with and you don't want to be like them, things that maybe you saw on TV, or things that you just, or things that you think are cool. Like, if you think guns are just cool, like, you end up being attracted to politics that support that. And I don't know, I think that this is like sort of like a primordial like swamp, right? Where all that stuff, to Elijah's point earlier, it's like these people aren't really fully formed yet. I mean, were you fully formed at that point or no? Like, I mean, you have known who you are for a while now, but like, what do you think about yourself when you think of yourself back then versus now?
I mean, I was probably still a lot like light years ahead of a lot of my peers for sure. There were still things I don't agree with now that I agreed with back then, of course. But I think I was in a good place politically with my views. I definitely moved a lot more to the left, but I've become more pragmatic in ways too. I guess that's just what happens when you get a little older. You become more, you don't really change too much. You just become more, you just kind of take the reality in. But I kind of got that stuff, early on. But a lot of my peers were really, I see a lot of my peers now, just, they're at the stage I was at when I was 15 or 16 politically. And now they're starting
just figuring things out.
They're just figuring it out. And I'm like, keep going. I'll see you on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, make a prediction for us. What's Robert going to be doing in 20 years? Where are we going to see him?
I mean, possibly in movies. I want to see that version of Robert.
He needs to improve his enunciation a little bit. His elocution is a little
I could see him maybe in a very like slice of life real movie, like a Richard Linklater or something like that. You know?
My God, I was thinking of like he looked like he would be a character in a Richard Linklater movie.
Yeah,
like 100%. Like he would be the baseball player who's deciding which girl he's gonna hook up with or whatever. Like that's.
He looks like, I mean, with a name like that and going to West Point, he looks like someone who could be running for Senate, to be honest. Like, go back.
Yeah, he could. He could very easily, like, go back and I mean, look, you're talking about a state. You're talking about a state where, like, Jeb Bush's kid, George Prescott Bush, is probably going to be, like, the next governor and hasn't really accomplished or done very much. He'll probably be president one day or something like that. If he is president, I will say that the person running his campaign could be somebody like the next character from the movie, which is a guy who probably rankled a lot of people. Ben Feinstein, who was the chair of the Federalists. Now, Ben Feinstein was, I don't know, man. It's kind of easy to hate him and hard to hate him all at the same time. He's 17 years old, and he's an amputee who lost both of his legs to meningitis when he was a young kid. And also has a deformation on his right arm. Here's Ben introducing himself.
It's this guy.
Reagan.
It's Ronald Reagan. Some people say they're a sports junkie. I say I'm a politics junkie.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
We live in the greatest democracy in the world, and I feel like a big problem is there's a lot of people today that are willing to discount the idea that America truly is a great country. Hard work can still get you to where you want to go. You just might have to work harder. And it's like, I think about me, right? Like, I'm an amputee, right? Like, it is not fair that I am missing my legs. I am put at a disadvantage that most other people do not have to deal with. But, like, clearly, I've been reasonably successful. And it's like, I've had to work harder, and I've had to work to overcome that. And the more we keep focusing on these other factors like race or gender or disability, and the less we pin it to individual failings, I think that's a very, very bad thing for this nation. And I think we're individuals, right?
So Ben goes on to, after considering himself for a run at governor, he ends up being the chair of the Federalists, which is a really powerful position. Basically, you're kind of the kingmaker, and you're kind of like running the campaigns for everybody. That was my understanding. Elijah, what was your impression of Ben? And I also want you to weigh in on whether or not the procedure, because the whole movie turns on a little bit of some political gamesmanship where Ben makes a procedural, it seems like it's sort of like a jurisdictional objection about whether or not in the district, whether or not his counterpart should be allowed to, limit the Q&A portion of one of the governors. It went over my head, and I'm wondering if you were watching that and if you think like that was bullshit, or if it was a legit, maneuver on his part. What did you think of Ben, and also what did you think of his little gamesmanship there?
I say he was really smart. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I would have needed him to help run my Boy State governor's campaign. I could have been a governor if I had someone like him. They were, sadly, people like the Bens at Florida Boy State were with the other people, with the nationalists, of course. But I think he was really smart. I definitely don't share his ideas, especially, along like what he perceives as, individual failings and his, perspective on, who's responsible in society for things. So I definitely don't share that. He seems to be a little bit, a lot more conservative than I am.
Much more conservative.
A lot more conservative. But I can definitely see him being someone who stays in politics or going to politics. A lot of people in Boy State end up going into politics. With the procedural thing, I kind of recognize a lot of it. When we got there in Boy State, we were organized into what they call cities. So, when we were in Boy State, we stayed at the FSU dorms. We stayed at, there were like 2 or 3 different buildings, and we stayed at those buildings. Each floor was like a city. So, you had like maybe, 50 to 100 people on the floor. And that was a city. So on that city, you elected your mayor, your city council, and all of that, your police person.
Oh, yeah. They didn't show much of that. Like that was, I guess, a more granular level, activity that the documentary didn't really focus on, I suppose.
Yeah, so they did all of that, and those are the people who ran the floor, made sure everybody was in bed by 10, made sure everybody was up, ready to go at the same time. And then from there, you elect your like House of Representatives, then you elect your like Senate for the building, I guess. And then from there, you elect your governor too, but then you were in parties as well. So some people in your city wouldn't be in the same party. You'll have people who are Federalists and Nationalists in the same city. So a lot of the times you'll have like somebody who hosts several positions. So you might have somebody who's the party chair, but they're also the mayor of like.
Which was the case in the situation we're talking about with the last character we're going to talk about, Rene Otero, who was the chairman of the Nationalists. And I guess he was also what you're saying. He was like the mayor of that particular city or something like that.
Or in Texas, I guess they call it districts or however they separate people. But he was doing a job. I saw it as like he was doing his job, like whatever his job was. Like, yes, he's the party chair, but he's also like maybe the district leader there. So, he has two jobs to do. So, I kind of thought, the Ben guy was, doing too much, to be honest. I thought he was just.
Yeah, very extra. Very extra. But it's funny because he didn't drop if it was an act, which I don't believe, I think he's probably really like that. He didn't drop it when they were doing the interview, and he made, which sort of cemented my general dislike of the guy. And it's hard to say you don't like a 17-year-old kid a double amputee who has like a damaged hand and stuff like that. It's like you don't want to say something like that as a 40-year-old man, but like, damn, I didn't like this kid. And he cemented it for me when he went into this whole diatribe about how conservatives are constantly dealing with bias, that conservatives are the ones always dealing with uphill road, and they're always being presented badly, and that was the reason that he stood up for me. I felt like jumping through the television. Dave, what did you think of your fellow Jew, Ben Feinstein?
I don't claim him.
He's in the tribe, man. You can't stop it. Come on.
I know exactly what you mean, though. Like, you really like feel bad for just really disliking this kid so much, but he just puts forth so much, so much of a negative personality that it's so hard to, feel anything for him.
Yeah, I don't picture him being I picture two things for him, and I want to hear what you think, Dave. Like, what's a future for a kid like this? I think he's going to be in politics or literally nothing else. Politics is the only thing made for a guy like that. I don't think anybody's ever going to cast a vote for him. I think more likely he'll be sort of like an Ari Fleischer type, like a speechwriter, coordinator, communications guy.
Yeah, I was going to say like conservative pundit or something like that.
Conservative pundit, maybe.
That's where I see
what I was going to say is even maybe a Roger Ailes type, and not the Roger Ailes that ran Fox News, but the Roger Ailes that ran communications for Richard Nixon way back in the 70s. That kind of a sort of, like frankly a dirty double dealer kind of guy, at any cost kind of guy, like the kind of guy who would do push polling in South Carolina for George W. Bush, like, and do it really fucking well, like just terribly well, in a way that it just
then we can hate him at that point.
Then it'll be all right. Yeah, it'll be a grown ass man. We'll be in our 70s still podcasting. So the last person I want to get to was somebody who I thought, we're going to get to who we thought sort of won the movie, and I think Steven Garza, who we mentioned earlier, was probably the guy who came off the best. But in my opinion, the person who won the movie was Rene Otero, who was a kid from Texas, who by way of Chicago, who I thought had just incredible Obama-style energy, but maybe almost like more like a Rahm Emanuel type, or maybe more of like a James Carville type, where, again, another person, he ended up being chairman for the Nationalists. Another person who, I don't know if people are ever going to vote for Rene Otero to be something. I think he might be the person who helps people win in his political career. Sort of a mirror image of Feinstein. They clash during the course of the movie. But he also gets he went through the same thing, obviously, that Elijah went through, where, they tried to impeach him. And because of that situation, he ends up with the movie's best burn, which was when the vote for impeachment comes nowhere near passing. He is able to get one of the best moments of the movie when he says this.
sure his name. I can't even impeach
That
him.
is about 12 out of 550. So I have a suggestion for your small numbers. Maybe start an intramural basketball team.
So good for him, because if you watch the movie, you'll know that based on some of the names and faces that were involved in the little like coup attempt against Rene, who is a young man of color. I'm not sure if he's like Afro-Latin or if he's African American, but he like the kids that were trying to get him ousted, you know, they looked the part. Let's just say that they looked like the kind of kids that would be trying to get him ousted. And it was like, you know, later on he was victim of a racist smear, a racist Instagram smear, basically. I don't know. What did you think of Rene, Elijah?
I think he was a lot like me. You know, when, you know, he was really quiet, you know, in the beginning. He was just trying to navigate it. Like, how the hell do I navigate this, like, mostly white group of people? It's like, I'm probably one of very few black people here, and my politics is probably not like them. So I think he navigated it best, and by, you know, staying true to himself, but also trying to bring people together. I just see myself in that a lot. When I first got there, I was kind of popular a little bit, but there were still, you know, a lot of like Trumpy people who were kind of racist at the same time. And, you know, I was Speaker Pro Tem, so I controlled the House. And I do remember, you know, the coup attempt wasn't as dramatic as that. It was more of, you know, they kept trying to do procedural things. And, you know, because I was on the floor all the time, I just killed it. I said, we're not voting on this. We're not voting on this. I just never let them vote on it. So what they kept doing every second was doing something called division, what they would call division every second. So every single vote, we just do an aye or a nay, and then some kid in the back would get up and call division, which means now we have to do a roll call vote of everybody standing up. And that would take long.
It sounds like a filibuster kind of, almost like a procedural filibuster, basically, which a filibuster is procedural itself. But
so I saw myself in that. I saw myself in that a lot, but I also saw somebody who kind of had kind of new political energy too. Like, it did give me some Obama vibes, but also like some it just gave me some type of like new like someone like really had to work for something. Like, he had to work to get elected there. That makes sense.
Yeah. And beyond just the aesthetics of being from Chicago and being similar to Obama in a lot of ways, like it also, when he was being really frank and sitting down and talking to the camera, and he said like, okay, look, this is what I'm going to do. I got my job. I'm keeping my job no matter what. And I'll be able to sneak the things that I want to do in by just agreeing with everybody. I feel like that's something that Obama ended up literally doing. And I wonder if he learned from that. I mean, it feels like to varying degrees on this list of like the 4 people that they follow, you can sort of make a chart of like who was the most honest and who was the most dishonest. And I mean, you know, if you do it that way, you could say that a guy like Ben Feinstein was very honest about who he is and straight up and straightforward. And Rene, vicious, cutthroat, smart, probably smarter than all of them. He probably has like a higher ceiling in terms of, you know, what he wants to do in his career, but also like maybe a little conniving, right? Or am I wrong? What do you think?
I agree. I think he kind of had to be in an environment like that. He just, you know, there was no other way. If he was just being authentic, he would never have gotten elected completely. He had to kind of lie a little bit, or kind of, you know, maybe we don't like to use lie and possibly like to use, you know, tell it a different way, tell the story a different way. So he kind of had to do a little bit of that. And, you know, you're right. Someone like Ben was just being painfully honest. That's just who they are as a person, you know. They are, you know, they don't give a damn. They just adapt to the political circumstances as much as they could. It's all about winning. Whereas with Rene, it was all about, you know, if I'm going to win and I'm going to be in this position, I might as well keep it type of situation. I was kind of that way too. When I was there, I wasn't fully like that. I was just kind of like, you know what, I'm going to let them pass all their gun control stuff, you know, all of their like pro-gun stuff.
Second Amendment, yeah.
They might be trying to do a coup now, but if I kill all of the like anti-gun stuff, if I kill all of the pro-Second Amendment stuff, then I'm really going to have a coup. They're really going to drag me out of Boise State. So I kind of understand where he was coming from with that. You know what? I'm in a position of power right now, over 550 people. you know what, I'm gonna just let them do whatever they want. I'm still on the top right here. So,
Dave, what was your impression of Renee? I mean, I feel like almost like he's more dangerous, maybe dangerous in a good way, than any of the rest of them. What was your impression?
Well, yeah, I mean, dangerous depending on where he ends up and what he ends up doing with himself. I mean, he definitely seems like the kind of person who can, you know, cast that kind of political spell over people, where the people who love him are going to just absolutely love him, you know, going forward in his probably political career. I mean, he really does seem like someone who is going to go in that direction. And, you know, thankfully, you know, one of the bright spots is that he seems like he'll probably be, at least for the most part, on the right side of things.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he I think has a really high ceiling in terms of what he could end up being or could end up doing. I think that other than Steven, I think that he shares this quality that's really not great. And I hope that it's not the case with a lot of the more like younger generation of as we see, you know, Gen Z become actually politically active. We see people like Elijah actually running for office against established people that haven't really done as much as we want them to do. I worry that that the lesson that they've learned from us is to be win at all costs isn't the right word. I would say more like to be dubious, to be like a little bit more like, I don't know, whatever it takes, I will do whatever is required of me to win. And I know sometimes I complain about how the Democratic Party doesn't do that enough, and Republicans really are better at doing that, you know. But I just hope that it doesn't really redound to that.
It's like the meme version of what people say, you know, politics are, or a politician is, you know, and that's what it's kind of playing into, is to like really just solidifying that as the only way.
It's like when you see a little kid pretending to act like an adult, it's cute, but then when they get to be around 17 and or like 18 and they're like right there on the cusp of manhood or womanhood, you're like, oh, that's not cute anymore. They're actually going to go out there and kill somebody. It's like they're going to start making choices, and I'm going to be like, they're going to be making the decisions when I'm like 80, and oh man, what's that going to mean? So let's move on to like who we thought won the movie. Again, my favorite character for me was Robert McDougall, the goofball who probably going to be at Burning Man one day, or be like a social media influencer or something like that, or be like an Instagram star, like Dan Bilzerian or something. But for me, the person who kind of won the movie was Rene Otero. I would not be surprised if he has job offers, honestly. Like, he seemed like a functionally I don't know who's going to hire Steven. Steven seems like he's going to be a movement unto himself one day. He's going to be somebody like Elijah, who runs for office and is the guy that is inspiring and that you want to get behind. Renee, I think, really created a career for himself in this movie. But Dave, what do you think?
Well, I definitely think what you're saying is probably right, but at the same time, I got to go with Steven Garza, because, I mean, you know, it's just such a bright spot, I think, in a lot of just really dark stuff when you like come down to, you know,
it is dark,
what all
man.
this politics
Seeing
is.
the kids act like
it's
adults,
super dark.
It can be a little scary. It's like, damn, go play football. But
there was another character, though, that I did love. It was the guy who was doing the Rubik's Cube while the final countdown was playing.
Yeah.
I think he also had a pretty strong showing in this
movie. Or the guy that
so.
did the Shrek cover song. That was
sure.
I would have figured that would have been your favorite guy, Dave.
That was good.
So
too.
You went with Steven. So Elijah, how about you?
Yeah.
I like a lot of them.
Elijah, and just so everyone knows, Elijah has transported himself outside. He's now in the wilds of
This is a first for Bird Road.
From outside. I think he's calling in now from
the wilderness.
Fort Lauderdale. No, where are you right now? Lauderhill? Where are you?
I'm in Fort Lauderdale, the wilderness of Fort Lauderdale.
So who won the movie from your perspective?
I like a lot of them. Like, I really like Renee, because I kind of identify with, you know, how he had to navigate Boys State very much. But I still got to go with Steven, even though I know Steven. Like, I think the addition to him as a character was a little bit about his story. Like they kind of tie his story in, and he made that kind of resonate as well with Boys State as well. So they were able to, tie all of that in. His background, his background as with his family as immigrants, and his struggle at Boys State, as well as his progressive policy specifically, and how that kind of how he had to navigate Boys State with that. So there was a lot of additional context that we didn't get with like Renee that kind of added to Steven as a character. And then it just kind of worked out well. I mean, the March for Our Lives thing, I was just talking to Matt Deesh from March for Our Lives the other day. We were just laughing about the whole David Hall thing as well. He kind of had that background, of him already being active and stuff as well with March for Our Lives. So I think all of that added to him as a character of like the perfect like politician or the perfect community person. And I think that strengthened him as a character in it. Whereas it, everyone else it could have seen, was just there at the time. Whereas Steven, you could kind of see this is somebody who had a really deep interest in politics, and this is like the beginning of his story, if that makes sense.
It's funny you bring that up because that was one thing I wanted to ask you about. Because if there was one big difference between 2016 and 2018, I would have to say the awareness, especially in the gun control debate, the awareness or the heightened level of talking about school shootings, right? Because right down the street from you, Marjory Stoneman Douglas happened in those intervening years. The tragedy there, very much on the forefront. School security was very much on the forefront. It seemed like in this Texas Boys State documentary, and sometimes it was being used as like we need to have more guns in school. There needs to be good guys with a gun to counteract the bad guys with a gun. Was that a big thing for you guys? Were you guys thinking about that or talking about that? Because I don't know if some of those, like for instance, Dave, remember we were talking about that, the school shooting that he talked about, Steven Garza talked about, that one completely flew over my head. I didn't even know that had happened. And I looked it up and there were...
Yeah, you're like, I didn't even remember that.
Shot and 10 people, I think, killed in that. I mean, like, there were so many of them happening.
I know the...
Sorry, go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah, from the Santa Fe, I know a lot of the families from Santa Fe. I kind of traveled to be with them. I know them well. Rosie Stone, who lost her son Chris Stone, who's a hero. So a lot of that. But in 2016, when I was at Boys State, there was a lot of gun discussion, but it wasn't around like school safety, school security, school shooting type of gun stuff. It was just people being very pro-gun, and it was around that time of the election where everybody thought, oh, Hillary, Obama, they're going to try to take away our guns, whatever. But it wasn't around like, it was polarizing still. It just wasn't because of, like Stoneman Douglas and shootings, and it was before that, but it was still like, I say that plus abortion were the two biggest issues at our Boys State was guns and abortion. And if I had to take a guess on what the third one would be, it would be something with like religion, like prayer in school or something. It was really conservative stuff. So I guess like their Boys State like was probably a lot more contentious in a lot of ways because of all of the issues and the awareness people had going into it. But ours was definitely more, it was less polarized in that sense.
Yeah. There's a statement that Renee says at one point where he's talking about how his mother's concerned about him having to go. She said, "Oh, it seems very conservative there. I'm worried about you. Let me know if you need me to come pick you up." And he says, "No, I don't want her. I don't want her to come pick me up." He says, "I feel like every liberal should have to do this." And I wonder what you think of that statement as somebody who actually participated in this, Elijah, whether or not you agree with that. Like every liberal who's like going to embark on a career in politics, having to go through sort of a little bit of a crucible, defending your beliefs and, walking into like the lion's den, as it were.
I agree with it. I mean, if you can survive for Boys State, you can probably survive anything politically. Like, I was Speaker Pro Temp. I led these like hundreds of these boys like in the House, and it was really contentious having to try to navigate and come up with compromises and being in charge of that whole process. Like having we got to get, because some of those bills, whatever bills were passed, some of those bills actually got introduced into the actual state house. So it was kind of competition amongst a lot of the boys, get their bills passed so, some representative could sponsor it. So it was really eye-opening, where you had to listen to a lot of people's different points of views. And a lot of it wasn't, arguing and fighting. A lot of it was, I feel this way. And a lot of it was, they grew up, their background. This is where I'm from. This is just our lifestyle, how I grew up, how I was taught. And you get to understand like why people feel certain things. And a lot of those boys were my friends, and a lot of those boys are still my friends, where they lean a lot more conservative, but I understand them from a human perspective. So it kind of gives you insight, as a human. And then, it gave me insight as well as somebody who's in politics and probably will remain in politics, on leadership, how to work with other people, even if they might be a little bit different and you probably don't like them or their policies at all. Just having to deal with hundreds of boys and, navigate that and sit down with people and, hey, we need to get this bill passed. What can we do? How can we change the language? I think, most people who go into politics could really benefit from something like the Boys State program. And I think they should expand that program and have more people, even if it remains conservative. I think being in a den of people like that who are really conservative kind of helped you be able to defend your own views a lot better. When I was there, I was really passionate about certain things. I was passionate about police violence. I was passionate about climate stuff. I was passionate about anything having to do with poverty. And I was in a room full of people who didn't give a damn. So the way to navigate, I just really learned how to defend my views a lot better, because I had 100 people coming at me about it. So I learned how to really argue it down to the core and kind of understand why I felt that way about things. So it's something I think that could be a plus for a lot of people, and everyone on the left should take advantage of programs like this, because it really does help in the end. You build lifelong connections. One of my friends from Boys State actually ran for city council this year. He lost, but he'll probably be making another return. Someone else he was actually our governor's candidate. Someone else from Boys State that I know really well. I think he went off to West Point. A lot of the boys, I still follow them. They're doing bits things. There's still a lot of connections you get to keep of people who will listen to you, even if their views and their policies are different than yours. These are people who you'll be able to have conversations with and say, hey, we're brothers from Boys State, and I think you need to take another look at this.
That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective. I hope it holds true, especially when you try to have like constructive dialogues with people, on the other side of the aisle from you. Dave, I know we want to run this as a little bit on your feed too, as a piecing it together. Elijah, Dave has a podcast that's focused on movies, and it's it has a lot more listeners than me. So maybe maybe you'll get some piecing it together folks to jump in on the donation, the contribution button. But the theme of the podcast is basically to come up with movies that maybe were inspired a little bit. And Dave had asked me to come up with with a suggestion or two of movies that were inspired or maybe similar to this. And the one that I couldn't stop thinking about was one that I didn't see until I was an adult, but came out when I was a kid, which is The War Room. Dave, have you ever heard of The War Room?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've never actually seen it though.
So The War Room is a 1993 documentary that's about it's set during the 1992 presidential election, where Bill Clinton obviously ended up winning. It's focused on his campaign, and the main characters they follow are James Carville and George Stephanopoulos, who were huge parts of the Clinton world. It starts in New Hampshire and goes all the way through all the primaries, and it touches on the Jennifer Flowers scandal and all of these other sort of Democratic Party controversies and things like that. It was the first real political cinema verite, kind of like this. And it's very similar to this in that it shows you the behind the scenes machinations, and it shows you oh wow, these are pretty young people, because Carville and Stephanopoulos were pretty young then too. They were in their the 20s and 30s at the time. Stephanopoulos was a wonderkind. He was a young kid. And you see some of the people involved, and they're so much better at doing politics than the people on the other side. They understand the new era, the new age of this crazy new time called the 90s, right? And I just thought this was almost just a younger version of that. I don't know. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, no, like I said, I haven't seen it, but just to see those people who went on to, do so much and be just such known names when it comes to this particular world, and to see them at such a young age, I can totally see that.
Did you have a pick, or did you not even bother to do the homework for your own podcast?
Of course, I had one. I have a couple ideas. I mean, I kind of threw out Lord of the Flies earlier,
okay, all right. You're going right on the nose, I guess.
I'm going right in there. But also another one though that I thought of, and it's not that bad, but I thought of just the way that there's this camaraderie between these people who are also kind of just total flat out competitors with each other at the same time. And I thought of American Psycho and these businessmen who are all just gathered around at lunch, and they're all kind of like, they're friendly, and they're oh, how's everything going, and they're comparing their stories, and they're just
loathing each other at the same time.
Just absolutely, they're at each other's throats underneath it all, and so that was the big one that to me kept coming up in my mind with this.
Huh. Okay, I could see that. And then if I was going to put one that was like straight on the nose, I would say Election, because I mean,
sure,
it's a great movie. It should be.
Every
movie should be inspired by the movie Election. It's a great film. Elijah, last thoughts before we let you go. What did you think of this represent? Did this movie accurately represent what Boys State is? And, what do you say to the folks out there who were sort of horrified when they saw the way that, oh my God, teenage boys actually act behind the scenes when nobody's paying attention to them?
I say it's healthy. It's really healthy. I mean, if our young people are like that, hopefully, a lot of it will grow out of. But I think it's great to allow, young people to have a space like Boys State to really express their political beliefs, kind of argue, see what beliefs are probably BS, and try to change them. I think the movie was a pretty accurate, reflection of Boys State. And I saw a lot of everything from procedure to how things work to the competitive nature to how serious people were about the competition as well. I think the film was really, really great. I hear talks about there potentially being a Girl State movie. I had friends from high school who went to Girl State, and I went to Boys State. But it was a really good film. I really, really enjoyed it. And I can tell you for sure my time at Boys State was fun. And I really do believe during my time there, I probably, worked with or sat down next to or slept in the same dorm as somebody who might end up being like the next governor of Florida.
So watch it, everybody. And as long as you're out there doing things that I tell you to do, also go check out ElijahManley.com. Find him on ActBlue. The link is going to be in the description of the show. Again, help him with a campaign donation. And the campaign's over with, but let's help resolve his campaign debt so that he can run again in the future for public office and do proud those American Legionnaires from Boys State that had all that faith in him all those 3 years ago. Elijah, thanks for coming on Bird Road.
Of course, no problem.
Hey, I'm Josh Bell.
I'm Jason Harris. Hey, Josh, we're friends in real life, but we're also co-hosts on this new podcast called
Awesome Movie Year, where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies and do a deep dive looking at movies including the Best Picture winner, the biggest movie at the box office, future cult classics, and more.
Including the biggest flop. And this season, we're doing 1994. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. We're all over the web as well at Awesome Movie Year on all the socials and awesomemovieyear.com. So please like us, subscribe, and if you do like us, give us a 5-star rating because we love you.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation over there on Bird Road. Hopefully we could cover documentaries in the future here on Piecing It Together. It would be good to be able to include some of those. There's been some great documentaries lately, and I'm not 100% sure if every documentary would really fit the whole puzzle pieces format, but I think we'll try to squeeze some in the future. And of course, more crossovers with Bird Road, because I love killing two birds with one stone. So I hope you enjoyed that. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. You can make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together and to Bird Road over on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Pocket Casts, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. You can follow Piecing It Together on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And also, we've got a Patreon, which has a whole bunch of bonus content, but from all of these podcasts that I work on, as well as from my music career, which you all know I have a new album coming out, and I got a bunch of music-related stuff hitting that Patreon soon. So it's called Produced by David Rosen because it's all-encompassing of all this stuff. And it's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. So check that out. We really appreciate your support. And the more people who sign up, the more content we're going to make for it. So very much appreciate your support. And speaking of my music, let's close the show out with a piece of that music. And you know what? I think for this one, since this was a Bird Road crossover, I'm going to play the song that used to be the Bird Road theme song. It's called Free Fall. It's from my album Head Like Fire. And it used to open every show. We've transitioned to some new music you probably heard there at the top. But check out Free Fall. This is my third album, Head Like Fire. But my sixth album, which is just self-titled, it's called David Rosen, comes out October 4th.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.